Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Marsh, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to present to you the findings of my Writing 465 feasibility study. The basis of my study was regarding the need to develop academic learning pods at my local church, Greater Life Ministries. To begin, I'd like to level set on what learning pods are. Learning pods are small groups of children enrolled in virtual learning. Typically, there's one adult assigned to each group, and the purpose of this structure is to mirror the in-person classroom environment. During my studies, I conducted three types of research: an interview, surveys, and comparative studies. The comparative study really confirmed the structure I had in mind was on target for the program: 5 to 6 children to a group with one adult. My initial thought was to have just an adult in general, but through studies I discovered parents prefer to have a certified teacher present to help with the students. I have to say, the surveys and interview, although both supported my recommendation, I was still shocked at the results. So I'll start with the survey. The survey showed 60% of students, where my initial thought was students were struggling with virtual learning in the transition from the in-person classroom. However, per my study, 60% of my surveys showed that the participating parents' children actually showed improvement in virtual learning. But on the contrast of that, there were still 80% of the parents who did express interest in having a program like this available for their children, whether it be for social development or just for academic development. It wasn't because, as I thought, that their children were struggling. They would just be interested in a program such as this to help their child as they are in the virtual environment to mirror the in-person classroom environment. Now, the interview is probably where I saw my most shocking results. During the process of the interview, I was able to interview Lancaster County School District 8th grade teacher, Mrs. Bianca Thompson. And during our conversation, she was able to shed light on a topic that I initially hadn't thought of. My initial thought focus was on social and academic development and the causes or the effects that virtual learning could have on those two aspects. However, after my conversation with Mrs. Thompson, she stated for me and confirmed for me that those were, in fact, not really the areas of concern or where they're seeing their greatest challenge. The greatest challenge she mentioned for me is, in fact, behavioral. As she talked me through this, one of the things she pointed out to me was in her specific situation, she's an 8th grade teacher. Now, typically at that point, when the children are in the 8th grade, they've had 2 years of their middle school experience. They are well versed in the way middle school works, and they've pretty much become accustomed to the structure of the middle school experience. Remember, when they come into middle school, they're coming in from elementary school, and 6th grade is their first year before they really start into their middle school career. However, when you think about her specific position, when these students transitioned into middle school, being the 6th grade, in 2020, they transitioned into junior high during the pandemic. So many of them were snatched from that type of transition or that structural environment in 2020, and then they were out of that environment for a year and a half, almost 2 years, and now when they're back in, they're in the 8th grade, and where normally they will be accustomed to the environment and would be accustomed to the structure of the school away from elementary school, many of them are getting their first run into the middle school environment. And so from what she told me during our conversation, that's where they're seeing the bulk of their challenges, is getting these students accustomed to the structure. And so she also confirmed for me that this type of program would be helpful, not just for the academic and social development, but also from a behavioral standpoint, where students are in a more structured environment. So when they do have the transition of going back into the structured environment, it's not such a challenge to to transition back because they're leaving something that has been structured. So based on all of my research, I have come to the recommendation that this program is feasible. And my recommendation would be that we start the enrollment for this program as soon as possible, being that the school year has already or is coming to an end, that we start enrollment as soon as the school year ends and we start for the enrollment of fall of 2022. And once that enrollment is complete, once the program actually starts, I look to start enrollment at the beginning portion of the following year once we're rolling into the program very well. So again, my recommendation has been that this program is absolutely feasible. I look forward to working on it and getting it developed. And I thank you so much for your time today as you took the time to hear my findings on my feasibility study. Thank you so much for your time, and you all have a great evening.